To make a move like that, you have to have kahunas and conviction.
Long term, I'm bullish. We could see about a 20% correction next year.
This is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback. Don't touch that dial. Hi, everybody. This is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback. We're live on Clubhouse, YouTube, WOR every Saturday and Sunday at 9. And we're being joined by special guest, Dr. Frank Sorrentino, PhD, author of Presidential Power and the American Political System. Sounds intriguing as a history buff. Dr. Sorrentino received both his PhD and master's degree in politics from NYU, spent time on the faculty of NYU, Long Island University, and Kean College. So a lot of our listeners are familiar with those fine institutions. So Dr. Sorrentino, describe your background for those who are not familiar with your work.
I'm a specialist in American politics with a subspecialty in the presidency and the American political system. So my focus is on how the presidency impacts public policy and the American political and economic system.
Exciting. So how does I'll ask the first question then. How does the presidency affect the Fed?
Well, the president appoints the members of the Fed subject to Senate confirmation. And the Congress can impeach and remove individuals as well. But generally, the Fed chairman is the representative of the president's policy. They're overlapping terms. So someone like Jay Powell was up for renomination already when Biden had become president. He was appointed by Donald Trump.
So how many Fed people have been impeached? Do we have a record of
None.
that? None. So
None.
So first question, the Fed has raised interest rates again this week, 75 basis points. What is your past studies into presidential power? What does it tell you the Fed will do next? Will they keep raising rates? Will they not? Nobody knows exactly.
Yeah, that's the interesting question, because as they raise rates, you're destroying economic activity. And while that may be necessary to achieve the reduction in inflation, it's a very heavy political price. And that's the problem that they're going to face. We've already seen a significant reduction in real estate. And as a consequence, we're going to see a similar reduction in a lot of economic activity, particularly those that are dependent upon borrowing. And we've seen a robust job market, but that should change shortly.
Great. So so the Fed raised rates this week. Was this a good idea?
Yeah, I think the problem here is, does the president of the United States or a political party, Democrats in this case, are they willing to tolerate the problem of inflation, which is a difficult problem, and they're going to face that in the midterm elections. But at the same time, a downturn in the economy may even be worse. So I think there's a limit to how far they will tolerate. And I think Jay Powell is reading what the president wants. So while the Fed's independent, they're not going to go as far as they would like. I think Jay Powell has become a hawk on raising the rates, and I think that's going to be problematic for the president and the Democratic Party.
Sure. So how have aggressive rate hikes impacted the economy in the past?
Well, the classic example is during the Carter administration with Paul Volcker, and he raised it extremely high. And what we had is one of the deepest recessions in American history. Of course, Carter was defeated in 1980, and Ronald Reagan became president and supported Volcker. But he had a 4-year leeway before the economy could turn around, and he would not suffer the political consequences of a depressed economy. So I think that the first 2 years of the Reagan administration, we deridedly called it Reaganomics. And then, of course, the economy took off. And when the economy took off, Reagan was in great shape for the '84 election. But for Joe Biden, he's got a problem right now, and that problem could get extremely difficult as time goes on. Now, he may decide not to run, but the party is going to have a candidate in 2024.
Who do you think the candidate will be? AOC?
No, I don't think it'll be AOC, but that's the problem. I think Democrats have a weak bench. Certainly, we're talking about Pete Buttigieg. We're talking about Gavin Newsom. We're talking about Kamala Harris. These are the three most likely, but there may be somebody.
Wait, who was the third one? So who's the third one? Kamala?
Kamala Harris.
No, I have her. I got that one. I got
Pete Buttigieg.
Newsom. Oh, Pete Buttigieg. That's your third. I don't think anybody's voting for any of those three. I think there'll be another one. There'll be like a dark horse, like some Democrat from a Midwestern governor.
Well, that's certainly possible. Governor Poli from Colorado has a moderate record. It's pretty articulate. So those are all possibilities.
Yeah, somebody like that I could see. Probably not the governor of Colorado, but I don't see any of those people winning up against a DeSantis. I don't know. Do you think? Oh, that's a good question. Do you, as a student of presidential power, you're going to say something. I want you to say what you're going to say. Then I'll ask you another question.
No, it's difficult sometimes 2 years out. I think 2 years out before 2016, we would have never guessed Donald Trump. But he was able to galvanize the Republican Party. The question becomes, will he be the nominee in 2024? He's certainly indicating that he wants to run, but he has an age issue, and he has the problem of while he excites the base of the Republican Party, he also excites the base of the Democrat Party.
So will Trump, do you think he'll run in 2024?
I think that's his intention. I think that's definitely his intention. He's indicated that he's most likely to run. He's very close to that decision, and maybe as close as a week or 2 weeks after the midterm elections that he will announce.
So you think he's going to do it? I don't know if he will. I don't know if he could bear on his ego losing twice. I don't know.
Well, that I think will be determined. But I think the intention is that he will run. Now, the question becomes, is the Republican Party going to see him as their savior for 2024? Or does a younger, more temperate figure like Ron DeSantis runs? And he may be less polarizing than Trump. But I think it's Trump's nomination to lose. And if he decides to go in, it's going to be very difficult to stop him from getting the nomination.
So, yeah, I think if Trump runs, he has to be the candidate. And maybe he takes, it looks like the Republicans, we're going to have a red wave. Looks now the Senate's going to go 53-47 in favor of the Republicans, which is quite a difference from a month or two ago. People would say it was different. Do you have any Senate predictions?
Well, that's a good prediction. The reason why people, I think, did have that number earlier is that in a midterm election, people decide late. And if they haven't decided for the incumbent party, it usually breaks for the opposition party. So this is a kind of normal series of events. And what we're seeing is in the close races, it's breaking red or breaking Republican, both in the House and in the Senate. And if you could argue, even on the gubernatorial levels. Yeah,
if we look, I like to go, I don't know, since you're in the know, I find the Real Clear Politics average. Oh, this tells you about how slanted certain people are with these polls. So I go to Real Clear Politics and I don't look at the poll that they have on their front page. I go to the Senate and I click on, okay, so let's say I want to see what's going to happen in Oz. They have Oz up by 0.1. But if you click on the Oz 0.1, you have to scroll down. So this tells you about the slant of even Real Clear Politics, which is more, okay, we have every poll. You have to scroll down to see the RCP average 4 days to election day on 2016, 2018, 2020. Yes, we're a financial show. We're going to do a little political junkyism because that will impact the economy dramatically, the stock market, the Fed, all of those things. And we're going to kind of intersect them all this hour. It's going to be a really exciting hour on presidential politics and money. You will not want to miss the whole hour. So I go to the Real Clear Politics, and I want to get your take on this after the next break. So I now see the adjusted poll average on November 4th based on Clinton overperforming in Pennsylvania in 2016, based on Casey's 2018 and Biden 2020 performance, that according to that, they're adjusting the poll average and saying Oz wins by 2.5%. That to me seems like the most bipartisan methodology. Am I wrong there? Like a non-slanted view?
I think all polls have biases. For example, what they do is they call it a stratified sample, and men, women, different.
But what I mean is they're taking into account how underestimated the GOP was in the polls in past and kind of adjusting it. Do you think there's merit to that, or no?
There's some merit, but it's not all that effective.
So, Dr. Sorrentino, talk about polls. What polls can be believed?
Well, I don't believe too many. Let me give you an example. In the 2020 election in the state of Wisconsin, they had predicted Biden would win by 17 points, and he won by about 1% if we could agree that all the numbers are accurate. So a lot of polls have the purpose of, I don't even want to say bias, encouraging a particular electorate to come out or be discouraged. So I think there are a lot of problems with them. The biggest problem is what they call the numbers of people in the electorate. For example, in 2016, I had predicted that Trump would win based on the notion that they were suggesting that the Democrats had 10% greater size of the electorate. And that was based upon some of the Obama landslides, particularly in 2008. And I think sometimes willful thinking. So I always reduce the amount between 5 and 7 points. Now, that's one issue, and it's a big issue. I think the Republicans are generally underrepresented in these polls. The second part of that is Republicans or conservatives are more reluctant to cooperate with pollsters. Some of them dislike the media institutions. Many of them fear that there is some kind of repercussion. So I think in general, what we find is that when the polls are close, in the last, let's say, 6 years, they have not been very accurate, and it may indicate a Republican wave. I'll give you another example. DeSantis was very close between him and Andrew Gillum, and he won quite substantially in Florida 4 years ago. So I think there is a real question on how they set up the polls and what the motivation is. So I would go by some of the polls like Trafalgar and Rasmussen are less partisan. And then, of course, the late surge. So I think the polls right now are underestimating the red wave that may be taking place on Tuesday.
We're talking about the red wave. Do you believe the red wave will have any impact on the stock market? Like maybe stop this stock market slide we've been having? Is there anything from history that tells us? I mean, typically from my studies, divided government tends to be good for the stock market. So if you have a Democratic president and a Republican Senate and House, it may be a Goldilocks phase for the market, but things look so much bad otherwise. What say you?
I agree with that. Certainly, we know that the parties tend to have a sort of extreme levels when they vote. For example, to get the nomination of either Republican or Democrat Party, you have to go either extreme right or extreme left. And then the money that's behind the candidates often goes with the leaders of the party. So when you have a split government, you sort of create more stability and more centrist kind of government that the people may be demanding or actually represent, but are not indicated in the elections that take place.
Any stats that back that up?
Well, I think the stats that sort of back that up is that Biden supposedly won by 6 million votes, and almost immediately, within 6 months of his presidency, his poll numbers went way down, partially because of Afghanistan, but partially because the American public perceived him as more a man of the left than a man of the middle. And those policies are not as popular. And I think the same could be said about on the right. We certainly know that the vast amount of people who vote are more in the middle, but they're given two choices and they're not very happy with those choices. So sometimes the synthesis or the combination of a divided government actually provides more what the American public desires.
It's exciting. We're with Dr. Frank Sorrentino, expert on presidential politics. Let's just go state by state. Let's get your predictions. You want to predict some things? We're not holding you to it, but it's a little fun. So Dr. Oz is up 0.1. I'm going to say he wins by 5 because that guy Fetterman seems to be tanking quickly.
Yeah.
Would you agree there?
It's almost hard to believe that Fetterman could be in the lead on certain polls. I mean, we could feel sorry for him, but he's unable to even to put together a couple of sentences in a coherent manner.
So you agree with me? Pennsylvania goes red for the Senate.
I think so, yes. 5 points seems reasonable.
This is interesting.
Even after Oprah's endorsement.
You know what I'm looking for? I mean, Oprah, does anybody really care what she says anymore? I mean, I don't. I mean, Oprah is sort of a hack now. No offense if our listeners love Oprah, but I mean, we wouldn't have Dr. Oz if it wasn't for Oprah. So for something, I'm not the hugest Oz fan, but it's just interesting. I mean, she was telling us that he was this trusted doctor for her whole career, and now she goes against him. It seems like she's a bad friend. So even if,
yeah,
I mean,
not partisan. I mean, she's a Democrat, and there's nothing wrong with being a Democrat. But the problem is that people saw her as above politics.
Yeah, you assumed her as like your grandmother or your favorite aunt who's loving and, I don't know, even if your aunt had a different political view than you, she's still going to give you a hug. So, I worry about that I think that tarnishes her image. Okay, let's go to, this one's interesting. Senator, I never know how to say this. Is it Hassan?
Yeah.
In New Hampshire is only up by 0.1%. New Hampshire could go GOP. That's I think could be a shocker. That could bring it up to 55, 54. I'm going to say she holds due to the power of incumbency, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that's certainly possible. I mean, you got to remember the Democrats wanted Bolduc because they thought that he would be easier to defeat. And I think they're surprised that on some polls he's been either even or even above. But a lot of people see him as a more conservative figure, America first, the MAGA figure, if you will, and they may not see him as a moderate that New Hampshire usually votes for. So I think it's going to still be difficult, although in a way things happen. If we're on Tuesday night and we see Bolduc has won, we know that Patty Murray in Washington State may be in trouble because I think Hassan has the advantage. Certainly, she was a governor. She's been senator. She beat Kelly Ayotte, and I think she's going to be tough.
Yeah. So right now we'll say that Hassan holds. Then we got Nevada. This is interesting. The Real Clear Politics has Masto winning by 1.1, but I don't see Adam Laxalt losing 1.9. He is the illegitimate son of former Senator Pete Domenici, right? Isn't that his claim to fame?
Well, I think he's the grandson of Paul Laxalt, who was the senator and
Yeah,
Reagan's best
friend. But I think Paul Laxalt's daughter is his mother, and the father was Pete Domenici.
Yeah, well,
right?
There's all sorts of rumors. I'm not sure if I could verify.
No, I don't think it's a rumor anymore. No, it's true now. That wasn't a rumor. They came out, I thought, and said that. Anyway, I think Laxalt wins in Nevada. He's kind of a center-right figure in Nevada, pretty popular. I don't see him losing. What do you think?
Well, I think the critical area there is the Latino vote. And the Latino vote seems to be moving in the Republican direction. And Laxalt was the former attorney general. So he's already won a statewide race in the past. He's an attractive candidate and doesn't scare people like some Republicans scare people. And because I would think we would call it a purple state at this point, if not leaning Democrat. So I think Laxalt is going to have the advantage. I think it's going to be close, though.
What about Arizona? Blake Masters, the latest Real Clear Politics average, who was down dramatically, months ago in the polls. Now the polls have Mark Kelly, former astronaut, at 48.2 to Blake Masters, 47.2. So only a 1-point difference with the polls underestimating the GOP. It looks like that could go red. I probably think Kelly holds on if I'm a betting person, but being only down 1 in the polls, and we know the polls typically underrepresent the GOP, it looks like Kelly may be in trouble. What say you?
Well, I think the Libertarian candidate dropped out. He'll still be on the ballot, but he endorsed Blake Masters. So that's also encouraging for the Masters campaign. Plus, Kari Lake is running an exceptional campaign, and she may be the difference in that election. But people like Mark Kelly are sort of like, John Glenn, Dwight Eisenhower, if you will. People see them as not necessarily partisan, even though he's voted overwhelmingly with Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden. So this latest
that's what I mean. I don't necessarily believe that he's going to lose because of that kind of John Glenn. Maybe it's the astronaut appeal, even though he's a partisan, but people think he's moderate because he was an astronaut. I don't know why.
And his wife was shot, and all those elements have given him a great deal of sympathy. He also talks a game that he separates himself, that he's a fighter for the border. So he's more astute than a lot of the, let's say, Catherine Mastro in Nevada. I think he's a more astute and more attractive candidate. So he may hang on.
So I'll put you on does he hold on or no?
I think so.
Okay. So, and when we're going to do a little map, So basically, though, if the GOP wins 53-47, 52-48, could we have a Christmas Santa Claus rally in the market? You would say yes, right? People are going to be excited.
Yes, I think.
Now, I'll give you a warning. Typically, the market always does the opposite of what the consensus thinks. So I remember in November of 2020, everybody said, oh, when Biden wins, the market's going to crash. Biden won, market rallied. So you could have something where the GOP wins and the market crashes. I don't necessarily think that'll happen, but you could see sometimes the market is the opposite world, you know?
Well, certainly, I think you would know better than I, but I would argue that what we have with Jerome Powell is that he has this problem of the continuing spending by the Biden administration. So I would just suggest that some of the Biden agenda would be tapped down considerably if you have a Republican Congress. And it may leave Powell with more running room where he doesn't have to raise the interest rates as high as he's anticipating now. So
Yeah, that
I
could
think
be true.
There could be a rally.
No, I'm just saying, if I'm a betting person, I think we're going to have a good 6 to 8 months in the market. And then I think people wake up somewhere in the middle of next year and realize, oh, crap, the real estate market has gone down 20%. And then we're really in a recession. And then the market starts to crash again. But I could see a definite relief rally for the next 6 to 8 months.
I would also suggest, as you did now, is that there are some real serious structural problems in the economy. The workers' participation rate, the amount of debt that we have, the regulatory functions of government have become very extreme. The energy problems, they don't go away with a victory. And so I think there's a desire for the market to go higher, and I think there'll be less pressure on Powell. But there's still some serious structural problems in the economy and in the political system as well.
Rubio obviously wins in Florida, right? That's pretty.
Yeah, I don't think it's a contest.
Bud wins in North Carolina. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Vance wins in Ohio. Do you agree with that?
I do. Ohio is becoming a more reliable Republican state. Trump won it by 8 points. And there used to be the moniker that Republican can't win unless they carry Ohio, and that it's a swing state. It's becoming far less of a swing state.
Wisconsin, Senator Johnson holds on. He was looking bad. They convinced him to rerun, and it looks like he's pretty soundly going to win. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Mandela Barnes has a pretty radical past. He was not only defunding the police, but he talked very badly about America. And I think Wisconsin is not ready for someone as radical. Before he was exposed, if you will, to his beliefs, and we could argue whether those beliefs are valid, he had a tentative lead. But as Johnson was able to pursue the message of his campaign, he's now seems to be comfortably ahead.
Okay, Patty Murray, I did not even realize this. She's only up 3% in the Real Clear Politics average in Washington. Maybe it's due, is it people from the right in California? Did they move out of California into Washington? Is that why Washington could go more red? I think she holds
she's been
on,
there
but
for 30 years. And she was the mother in tennis shoes when she started. So now I think she's the great grandmother in tennis shoes. People get stale over time. And the situation in Washington, the problem in Seattle, the lawlessness, I think is coming back to harm her. And of course, they're also facing inflation, and you do have out-migration. Smiley appears to be an attractive candidate, but I would still give the benefit to Murray because it's a overwhelmingly a liberal state. But if she wins, you're talking about a significant wave, a wave on November 8th. She's extremely personable, smiley. She's younger. She has the dynamism. I think she's scary, Murray. But the Democrats are pulling out all of their heavy hitters and outspent her maybe 3-1. So that's the thing we don't see: the constant bombardment of ads and other people get out to vote people. That's been a particularly reliable Democrat state for quite some time. So it's going to be very hard for Smiley to win. But I
Now,
would
what
give the
about
edge to Patty Murray.
me too? What about Herschel Walker? Does he win in Georgia?
That's the great question. I don't think he'll get 50%, so that means there'll be a runoff in December. He obviously is very attractive in some ways and very bedeviling in other ways. He had a situation with mental illness. It looks like he may have offered his former girlfriends to have abortions, which we haven't validated. But at the same time, it raises the question of hypocrisy, duplicity, and I think the benefit that he has is Warnock is equally flawed. So in a competition between flawed candidates, I think it's going to be very interesting. The advantage that Walker has is that it looks like Kemp will significantly beat Stacey Abrams, and the top of the ticket may help him. But I don't think he's going to get 50%, and it's going to be a different electorate in December. So you may not get as many people out there. And the Atlanta machine, the Fulton County machine, is very, very powerful. That led to the two senators winning. Now, that could be attributed to Donald Trump and how he handled those two elections after his, defeat. But I think maybe Walker edges maybe 1 or 2 points, but certainly he's not going to get 50% in all likelihood. And that runoff is going to be crucial. If it's the 51st vote, we're going to see tremendous amount of money from all over the country.
I mean, that's where Georgia, the Republican Party gets the worst candidates. I mean, they need to hire opposition research to do a deep dive on candidates before they run. Because I don't know where they get some of these people. I mean, I know Herschel Walker, he's a nice guy. He does 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 sit-ups, whatever it is. But, really, not the best candidate. It was
I think that's Trump to a large degree. He'd give it, then he'd take it. And once he got behind Herschel Walker, that was very difficult for any other candidate to emerge. So he has that charisma, Trump. He has the ability to focus attention. And he's been very, very successful in having his candidates win the Republican primary.
I also find
people are flawed.
I also find it hard to believe that Herschel Walker, if you do the gut check, right? I don't know. Even though there's all these rumors about what Herschel Walker did, I find them not believable because I just think of Herschel Walker as this, when he played football, he was always a nice, likable figure. He wasn't a steroid user. He seemed very respectful, even when he was on The Apprentice, I remember. So I actually think I'll give the lead to Herschel because I actually think the electorate in Georgia won't believe the rumors. And I'll give you a shocker. He gets over 50%, but it's probably wrong. I think it goes to the runoff. I was in Atlanta a few weeks ago, and every garbage can in Atlanta had Ben & Jerry's. I don't know if they're allowed to do this, but they were basically campaigning against the Republicans did you see these pictures? Basically, on every trash can in Atlanta, it's something like Republicans are racist, get out and vote, or they don't want you to vote. It was very Very political, very kind of
Yeah. But
slanted.
I think the point that you're making is that Herschel Walker has that Ronald Reagan quality of being extremely likable. Even if people disagree with him, they give him the benefit of the doubt. And that, I think, has saved him so far, plus his record of philanthropy within Georgia. But at the same time, we can go back 2 years, and Mark Zuckerberg had spent a fortune, particularly in Fulton County, to get out the vote and have people augment the election commission and actually cure
Zuckerberg,
ballots.
really? Well, yeah, this is a point for financial, since we're kind of doing an election show. Folks, this is a good election theme that I've seen. If you're involving yourself and you're a leftist economic figure like Zuckerberg or Disney, getting involved in a tassel with DeSantis, it seems like the stocks where the companies have embraced leftist kind of ideology, they're not, those stocks are going down. Meta going down. Disney going down. So woke politics is sort of backfiring on the stocks. So I don't know if that's a theme, but it's an investment theme that I'm seeing. Whenever these companies get too big and they're focused on leftist economic politics, maybe avoid them. I don't know, because they're ticking off half their customers.
Zuckerberg overplayed his hand, but what we know is that almost $500 million of donation to the Biden camp through his nonprofits ended up leaving a situation where he's lost half the wealth of that he had before. So sometimes, you
imagine losing half of your wealth. Incredible.
Yeah, so it sort of backfired on him. And now he's also was involved with suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story. He claims the FBI came to him and suggested that there was disinformation that existed, but he seemed to be a willing participant in that. So I think a lot of people have turned off to Zuckerberg and somewhat critical of a lot of corporations. Let me go one step further. When we talk about the laws that were passed in Georgia, the election integrity laws, as Governor Kemp would call them, but Joe Biden called them Jim Crow 2.0. And you had companies like Delta and Coca-Cola actually overly criticizing those laws. And what you ended up having is a situation where they moved the All-Star game out of Atlanta. And so many other corporations joined in to boycott Georgia and Atlanta. So sometimes that heavy-handedness could be counterproductive. But the corporate, even in Georgia, seem to be pretty left.
Okay, 52 to 48. 52 Republican, 48 Democrat. So it wasn't 53-47 like we thought. So
there may be some surprises.
It seemed like you believed in the power of incumbency with Hassan, Murray, and Kelly. But I guess if Hassan loses, then Kelly and Murray probably loses. So it could be 55-45.
It'll be a long night.
And then if Warnock wins, see, I think the reason why Warnock won, I don't think people are talking about this, is the candidate Warnock faced was even worse than Herschel Walker. It was the woman who bought stock, right? Or sold stock in advance of COVID. And as you saw with Georgia, they didn't like people telling them how to run. They passed tough election reform laws, right? But they didn't like other people meddling. They didn't like Trump meddling. They didn't like Loeffler. You know, you always see that people don't like their they don't like Congress, but they like their congressperson, when they vote.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think it's some of that. I think Walker could surprise people because I think Loeffler gave an air that she was this rich, snobby woman, and she seemed like a nice woman when I've heard interviews from her, but I think they didn't like that. Something seemed a little fishy with the stock thing.
Yeah, and she was appointed by Kemp. So as a result, she didn't necessarily have a strong political base in Georgia either. So she proved to be not a very effective campaigner. And I think there's where Herschel Walker outshines her. He's not only a Heisman Trophy winner, successful NFL player, but he has that familiarity with politics and celebrity, as Obama suggested. And celebrity is still an important value in American society. So I think he's infinitely better than Loeffler. I would add one other thing that Trump's campaign, when he went down there, he may have suggested that there were real problems in the electorate and may have suppressed the Republican vote. And that may have also contributed to Warnock's victory.
Where do you think the economy's headed? Obviously, stock market may be favorable due to divided government, but sometimes the stock market is different than the economy. So do you think we're headed for recession?
Well, I think we are in recession. That's my conclusion. But I think the real problem here is that the culture is changing. And the culture on the desire, the work ethic is a problem. People have decided, well, we like to use the term quiet quitting, the percentage of people involved in the job market. People have this sense of entitlement, which I think is contributing to a lack of productivity in the society, the lack of leadership, as a lot of people still work at home, and the debt that we're accumulating is almost obscene. If we have $31 trillion, if our interest rates are going to be in the 5s and 6%, that's going to eat up so much of our budget just in interest payments. So those are structural problems. And we've actually added more entitlements, whether it's childcare, bigger discounts on Obamacare or the affordable health care. Those are things that even the Republicans are going to find very distasteful to change. Once an entitlement is there, there are interest groups that support it. And we used to call Social Security the third rail in American politics. Some of these other things have become equally potent. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult for us to get out of it very quickly.
How will we get out of it?
That's a great question. And I think we get out of it through pain. The pain of not being able to have the standard of living that we had in the past, and that people will reconsider certain positions that they've had. Even when it gets down to the meritocracy of our colleges, meritocracy in terms of our corporate system. I think when we decide that we have a luxury to engage in equity rather than talent, we end up with a less productive society. And the rise of China is going to be a strong element for people to say, we want America to continue to be the dominant country in the world today. And I think they'll see that slip if we don't make the changes.
To be hopeful, this kind of reminds me of the 70s, what we're going through. Does it remind you as the historian?
The 70s were a bad time. Low economic growth, stagflation, the conflicts that existed, the polarization, and certainly we had the Vietnam War, we had Watergate, we had a lot of things that seemed to be insurmountable. And then, of course, Ronald Reagan became president, and things weren't immediately beneficial. But certainly he seemed to have a combination of policy and personality that was able to right the ship, or at least better than it was, significantly.
So maybe that'll be the good thing. Maybe we'll have another Ronald Reagan or something like that in 2024.
Yeah,
We'll see.
I think that's the number one problem that we have is the quality of leadership. I often ask people, who would you follow? Whether it's in education, whether it's in the corporate world or the political world. I think that a lot of people are searching for that je ne sais quoi quality, where people feel that someone is truly interested in them and interested in the nation's well-being. And I think right now people just see individuals as corrupt and self-centered and not fulfilling that larger goal. And while Ronald Reagan was a politician, he was a very good politician by probably suggesting that he wasn't a politician. Like Eisenhower was a great politician as well. John Kennedy was a great politician. These are people that are able to transcend their partisan divide. And right now, I don't see that very often in the two parties right now.
Now, inflation. What do you think? What do you think inflation will slow?
Well, I think it might slow with the economic destruction that the Feds are engaging in. We certainly see it in the housing market and all the ancillary industries that are related to housing. So I think that's going to reduce demand in so many areas. But then we talk about big tech. They're highly dependent on borrowing. So I think eventually, if Powell has his way, we will defeat inflation, but it may be at such a high cost of economic destruction and slowdown that may be the Achilles heel of why we don't succeed. We back off. Now, the other hand is that what do we do with energy? And energy seems to be the major component of almost every aspect of the economy. But right now, there are a lot of people who believe that the climate change is an existential threat. I think people, when they see their home heating fuel costs, their gasoline costs, and how it affects the economy in general, industry that is dependent upon energy, that may be a gradual shift away from those policies. But right now, I think it's very, very difficult. We're dependent upon the Russians, the Saudi Arabians, the Venezuelans, and they're not necessarily willing to help us with low energy costs. And that's a key component to almost every part of the economy.